Okay, so I went ahead and built out all the rest of my call-up scenes for D, E, and F. You can see that we have that there. The next step is that we want to build an OTS within this whole transition logic package. We'll keep it fairly simple as far as the design. Again, we just want to set up the functionality. So we're going to go into the master scene and add the OTS this way. Or in this scene, we're going to call this new group that I just drug down, OTS Design. You can call it pretty much whatever you want as well. For the OTS, it's just going to give the producers and or trio operators the ability to change several bullet points and or a picture. Now the big functionality of this is actually going to be in the call-up scene, not so much in the master or background scene. The design is only going to live in the background scene. So what I'm going to do is use a Nagi again. I'm just going to start with this. Again, we'll take the stretch down to 0. We'll limit our corners to 0 as well. Our height, this is just going to be our title bar. So however you want to do this, you may want to do a completely different design, but let's say I'm just going to make that a title bar. I have a couple of images that I'm going to use here, so I'll drop this down. Let's change this one to vertex, and let's copy this Nagi. We'll move it down a little bit. Depending how you want it to animate, you may want to change the vertical alignment or the horizontal alignment. Let's say, just in case I wanted to animate down from the top, I'll put it at the top. I'm also going to just increase it a little bit, adjust the height a little bit to whichever height you want or feels good for you. The texture, again, I'm just going to, instead of use the vertex, I'm just going to change it to linear perhaps, and we'll just move the texture however we need to here. If you want to add that material on it, again, we can come into the materials and add a little bit more depth to it and play with the settings as well. I don't want to sit here all day and tweak it, but let's just say that's kind of what I want. Now let's add a little bit more texture to it. So I'm going to copy that Nagi, and I'm just going to set one back in Z position a little bit. I'm going to go into my images here and grab something else. Here's like a little texture image, get rid of the material, and we're going to click on the image. Let's reset this image to all of its default parameters, and then we'll just take the scaling down a little bit, and here you can see it gives us just a little bit of texture on there. I'm just going to reposition this a little bit. Maybe we'll have it be up there. One other thing that I want to add to is perhaps a flare. So I'm going to drag a flare down, and we'll bring this up. When I work with flares, one thing I do like to use is this plugin called the Expert. So I'm going to go into my globals, find the Expert plugin, and drag that onto my flare. I click on the Expert and I click Add, and that gives us a little bit extra light here. So with flares, I'm just going to scale that out, scale it down, maybe proportional, however you want it to look. Two things are going to happen here within this scene. We're going to have, since we did add this flare, I kind of wanted to rotate or to loop a little bit, and we also need to bring the OTS on. However you want to animate the OTS on, that's fine. We could do the pieces individually or have everything just slide on at once. So let's say we want to do this kind of individually. Since our Nagis were set to the top, that could be an easy thing. So I'm going to go into the stage. I'm going to create a new directory here. We're going to call this OTS, and let's call it O, all caps, so it'll be easier for me to remember at least. Now notice I have my OTS design. That container's name completely separate, so just be aware of your naming conventions. All right, so let's organize this a little bit. This is our back plate or BG plate, however you want to call it. I'm going to come into our height, and let's make an animation here at 30. It's going to land there. At 0, I'm going to take this back to 0 as well. Let's copy that animation right onto that one. Now we're in our stage here. What I'm going to do is start adding my stop points. I'm clicking on my OTS director, rewound my timeline to 0, click add stop. At the end, I'm going to click on the director and click add stop. Now I'm going to call the first director capital O, and my second director here, I'll just call it A. For my title bar, let's say maybe I just want this to come on from the right. So I'm going to just change that Nagi setting to the right. And that's where I want it to land. I'm going to rewind my timeline and set my width to 0, and it will grow on from the right. So it comes on, we hit continue, kind of goes on like that. If you want to come in and tweak the animation, let's call this one title, so it's easier to find it in the stage. Tells you the name here. If you just want to have the title come on first and then these two kind of come on afterwards, we can tweak the adjustment like that. Now we hit continue, comes on. All right, one more thing, the flare. I want to put the flare in a group, rename it, and then we're going to place an alpha on the flare because we need that to animate on. So I'm going to go into my built-ins, into our globals folder, and have the flare animate on. It's coming on, it'll be at 100. I take it down to 0. So we hit continue, that comes on. Now one more thing with the flare is that I wanted to animate or loop from left to right or right to left. So I'm just going to create an animation on this. I'm going to set a keyframe and then move it left to right and set a keyframe. The difference with this is that I'm going to separate out this animation. I'm going to make a new director. I'm going to call this OTS loop. And I'm going to slide that flare animation in there and extend this out so it's going to be a lot slower. 20 seconds. I'm going to click on that and then loop this. So if I play this particular animation, you can see what's happening there with the flare. And again, design wise, spend some more time on your own tweaking it however you want it. By the way, all of these images and flares are available for download at the starter kit at TootsGFX. So if you need some images and or flares for your design, feel free to download that. Now, one thing I do like to do with anytime I introduce a flare into a transition logic scene is that I need to kind of tell it to start that flare. And this introduces a new point. It gives us a chance to do some action script. So I'm going to come in here and create an action script keyframe. So I'm just going to call it loop. I'm going to click on that loop and I'm going to click little keyframe here, and I'm going to highlight that keyframe, and I'm going to come into my action script and I'm going to type this scene stage director, and I need the name of the director, which is OTS loop. So I'm going to type that in, and I'm just going to hit start or type start, and that's it for the action keyframe. Now anytime this director gets triggered, it's going to hit that action keyframe and say, okay, start this director as well. So we have that. Now, next step I need to do with this design, it's all set up, is to actually add the toggle. So I'm just going to come in here, add a new group, call it OTS because that's what we called the director. I'm going to go into my built-ins, into the container folder, drag this toggle down and click on it. It added those extra containers. If I hit default keyframes, I should get the animation wheel on there, and if I go into the stage, then we should have additional directors here. So the OTS-A, the OTS-AO, BX, BO, AX. Again, we have these default animations, so if you want to increase or decrease the speed of that, we can do that as well. I'm going to leave that as is right now. I'm going to save my scene. I want to take a snapshot of my OTS because the next scene that we're going to create some functionality within the call up scene for this OTS.